brand new program that humanities team, Greg Braden, have created together. Nassim Harriman is part of it. Bruce Lipton is part of it.
Okay, and we've got
amazing.
maybe,
We're going to talk about
there's an
Nassim
audio
Harriman's
that's off. So
contributions
one
to
second here,
the
everybody.
program
Neil and I are going to come
and
on
to,
here with
the
you
Global
live.
Oneness
Just a
Summit,
second.
his Unified Science Award. Really, Nassim Harriman's contributions to the planet. I want to first, though, just shout out to all of our friends that are watching here. Thank you for joining us during this live program. We come to you every Wednesday at 9 a.m. camera with questions for Timothy, if they have them during the hour. Also, our friends and humanities
So
team
we hope to get
all
this
over the world
ironed out in just a
thank
second,
you all for
everybody.
joining us.
That's the audio
The
track
Sign
from
Network,
last
John
week
Raymer,
here.
big shout out to you. And guess what? John and his wife Summer, guess where they are today? They're driving through Colorado. Isn't that cool? So I'm hoping to see them before they leave Colorado. They're down in the south part of the state, heading north here a little later up toward Rocky Mountain Park. And so, we love the Sign Network, sign.network. Check them out. They're doing just great work all over the planet. Okay.
Well, just a few minutes into the program here, Neil and I can get started. So again, my apologies. Haven't had that happen before here, but we do actually have an exciting program for you this week. Thanks for being here.
This was
We can
pretty
see you.
exciting.
So you can also put in the chat, so we're in the green room. These are Stream Plus members in the green room. So you can also throw your questions in the chat or raise your hand here in a little bit as Neale and I get going, and we can bring you all in if you like. Nice to see you. Great to be with you. So shout out here first to just all of the friends of Neale Donald Walsch, Conversations with God Foundation, Humanities Stream members, Humanities team members, the Sign Network, John Raymer. Our theme here this week is conscious living expression. So really a juicy theme. Boy, Neale and I are going to get to have a lot of fun with this one. Let me read you just a real quick introduction for Neale. Neale Donald Walsch is the celebrated author of the Conversations with God series
Blah, blah, blah,
and a
blah,
modern
blah,
day
blah, blah,
spiritual
blah, blah,
messenger.
blah, 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 blah. Everybody knows who I am, for God's sake. Neale Donald Walsch is the celebrated author, the worldwide best-selling renowned. Who cares? Now, getting into the program for today, here's Steve Farrell, who's the worldwide executive director, widely known, soon to be published author, and who has better hair than anybody else in the world. Now, is there
All right,
anything
boy,
else?
this is just me and Neale when we're in the green room by ourselves. So now you get to see the two of us having fun together.
Is there anybody else who feels that we need to introduce Steve and Neale? No.
Okay. All right. Let's jump over into the program here. So just invite viewers. So it is live. So bring in your questions and your comments earlier in the program, the better. Here in the green room, you can raise your hand. We can bring you on camera if you like the idea. So we're going to talk about this whole expression of conscious living. And as we do that, let's start with conscious living. And Neale, I'm going to just throw this question to you. Why the heck is conscious living so important? Why do we build a whole initiative around conscious living?
Because if we are not consciously aware of the most important aspects of life, who we are, why we're here, and the impact that we're having on life, on our own life, and on the life of the collective that we call humanity. Because if we're not consciously aware of all of that, we're going to do more harm than good. And frankly, to be honest, for the largest number of people on the planet, that's what's been going on now for several hundred years, actually for several 100,000 years. But we're getting to the point, Steve, not to be too dramatic about it, but we're getting to the point where we're reaching what has often been called the point of no return. That is, if we don't change some of our behaviors, some of the ways we are being with each other, with ourselves, with the divine, and with the planet itself, if we don't change some of those behaviors, we're going to find that we've reached a point where we've passed that place where we can actually change them. And we can do some real damage, I mean, serious damage to ourselves, to our species, and to our planet. So consciousness is the only way that I know of to put the corrections that we need to create into place in our day-to-day life. And let me just give you one small example. I've had some in my own life, Steve, just to be very honest and very frank. I had a couple of marriages that didn't work out. And only when I looked back on it and realized how unconscious I was, simply unaware of what real pure love was made up of it and how I could engage in that experience. Only when I became consciously aware of that could I create the experience in my own life, just to use a simple life example. So I think that consciousness is the pathway, the only pathway I'm aware of that can lead us to altering our most important and significant and powerful behaviors. One last word, Steve, on the subject. My experience has been that human beings, we're living from a pattern, a behavior pattern that's been imprinted on us from thousands of years ago. And tribal mentality, what's good for me and for my tribe regardless of whether it's good for you and your tribe, what's good for right here and right now, regardless of whether it's good for the future. We have these imprints on how we imagine we should behave. Only a conscious awareness of how those imprints have damaged us and are continuing to damage us can bring us to a place where we can change the behaviors in enough time that our children and our children's children can reap the benefit of our movement to a higher level of consciousness. Sorry, that's a longer answer than probably you wanted.
No, it's not. It's such an important question. So thank you. So in fact, let's go a little deeper because the 9 series Conversations with God books really goes there in terms of this huge, I'm going to call it public conversation where people all around the world, 8 billion people currently can read the book, and where there's a conversation between you and I'm gonna say God. That's why it's called Conversations with God. Of course, that's everybody needs to make their own decision on that. But then it talks about who are we? And there's this big important discussion that carries through all 9 books around who are we, and it even capitalizes the who are we. What's that about, Neale?
Well, I think that all of us have a decision to make, a huge decision, and it is that we have to answer for ourselves the question: who am I? Who am I individually, and who are we collectively? And as I observe it, and as I experience it, there's only one answer to that question. Either we decide, I'm a physical entity. I'm, not much different from a bird in the sky or a fish in the sea. I'm a chemical creature, basically, more complex perhaps than some of those other chemical creatures. Maybe in my own idea, maybe I'm the most sophisticated chemical creature on Earth, but basically I'm a physical entity. I'm born, I live, I die. That's the beginning and the end of it. Or I could decide that I'm more than that. I could decide, wait a minute, maybe I'm a spiritual entity. Maybe this is not who I am. Maybe I'm not my body. Maybe I'm not my mind, or only my body and my mind. Maybe I'm more than that. Maybe I'm a spiritual entity having a body and a mind. If I make a decision that that's who I really am, it would alter most every aspect of my day-to-day, moment-to-moment behavior, and of the impact, frankly, that I believe myself to be able to have on my own life and on the world around me. So this is not a small decision. But if what's interesting about the decision, Steve, is that if a person says, no, I think I really am a spiritual entity, let's call it a soul. It's a word that's commonly used in religious environments and also outside of those environments. Maybe I really am a soul that has a body and a mind. If we decide that that's true about us, then we needs must answer the next most important question. Why am I here? If I'm a spiritual entity, what am I doing in the physical realm? Why didn't I just stay in the spiritual realm where things were, heavenly? I couldn't ask for anything more than that. Why in the world would I come into the world of the physical? And until we answer that question, which is the second question that follows, who am I? Which is, where am I in the physical realm? Why am I where I am? You know what's interesting, Steve? I've talked to a lot of people in the past 25 or 30 years since I've been on the speaking circuit, and very few people ask that question. I mean, deeply ask it. Why am I here in the physical realm? Most people have relied on the world's religions to tell them why, and most of our religions have tried to give us the answer. You're here in order to get back to where you came from. You're here to get back to heaven. You didn't choose to be here. You're here. Here you are, and you're right about the fact you are a spiritual entity. But your job, you came here to get back to heaven. So that explanation simply, at least for me, forgive me, folks, if it makes sense to you, but for me, that explanation simply has not made sense. You mean that I came here in order to go back to where I came from? Why leave in the first place? So there's a huge leap of logic. There's something that's missing, at least for my mind, some data missing. And that is what the data that was filled in for me when I had my conversations with God. I'd like to be able to tell you the answer, but I'm not going to keep it a secret because it's none of your business.
So, well, let me just skip into what is shared, this simple little cycle where it says we, in that physical realm, we're in knowing, and that's not enough. So we then say to the one, which we call the divine or God here in humanities team, but you can use universe, whatever term you like. We say, I want to experience that. And the one says, fair enough. Where would you like to embody? And, all of the questions that go with that.
Yes,
and then we go into experiencing, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure you stated that exactly the way it is. I think you said that when we're in the physical realm, when we're in the spiritual realm, whence we cometh, when we're in the spiritual realm, that's when we say, I'd like to be able to experience who I really am. And that experience cannot be had simply in the spiritual realm alone. One must move into the physical realm to have a direct experience of our true identity as an individuation of the one thing there is, which we call God, as you said, Steve, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever word it pleases you to use to define that ineffable essence that we call the divine. So we come to the physical realm because in the physical realm, there exists a contextual field. See, my understanding is that in the spiritual realm, all there is love. All there is God. All there is what we've commonly come to call heaven. And it's wonderful to be there, but that's all there is. There are no contrasting elements because the very nature of heaven is endless love here and now. There isn't even any time. It's always now. There's no other place. It's always here. So I was told that in the spiritual realm, what we are encountering is love here and now, always. And that's wonderful. But at some point, I want to know what it's like to express that, to experience it, not just to observe it, not just have it fill me, but I want to be the source of it. I want to send it out to others. I want to have a two-way interaction. So we come into the physical realm because in the physical realm, which is one of the three realms in the kingdom of God, the realm of the spirit, the realm of the physical, and the realm of pure being, we come into the physical realm because here we have ingeniously created, that is, the God that we are, ingeniously created a contextual field where there is, in fact, up and down, here and there, before and after, big and small, black and white, good and evil, male and female, created he them, where all these contrasting elements exist. Thus, we can know ourselves in our own experience. And Steve, I'm going too long with this answer, but let me conclude it by saying this. To give you a simple example of what I mean for those of you who are saying, what in the heck is Neale talking about? Let's just pretend that I decide that I want to experience my true self as the light. I'm going to use a metaphor. The metaphor is, I am the light. Now, I can know myself as the light in the realm of the spiritual, but I can't experience myself as that because guess what? There's nothing else there but the light. Love here and now. So I would then move my essence, the essence of who I am, my soul, into another place, which we call the realm of the physical, where there exists not only the light, but the darkness. Now, thanks to the presence of the darkness, I can experience myself as the light. Because if there was no darkness, I would be a candle in the sun. I'd be there all right, but I couldn't experience myself as anything because I'd be one of a million, gazillion other candles. But in the absence of the darkness, I could not know myself as the light. Therefore, when we encounter the darkness in this particular contextual field, raise not your fists to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness, that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well. And therein, in 3.5 minutes, is the secret to every question I ever had about why am I here? What am I doing here? What's the point of this?
Yeah, thank you, Neale. Beautiful. And it's a message that carries through all 9 books in the Conversations with God series and Neale's other books. Now, so this brings in our Changing Humanity's Future initiative, because this initiative, which Humanities Team, Neale, and the Conversations with God announced back in the April-May timeframe this year, was we launched this initiative because, as we know, all of us in today's world, we're in conversations in the living room, front porch, back porch, telephone, Zoom meeting, where people are gathering and talking about today's world. And there's a lot of hand wringing generally in these meetings where we talk about climate change and what's happening in the earth and existential crisis and Ukrainian war and Supreme Court and shooters and, and the list goes on. But how often in those conversations comes in this, what we're talking about here, the whole invitation, the reason that we embodied in the first place, the reason we're here, what Neale just took us through, which is said, well, no, this is why we're here. We actually, when we were in the non-physical realm, we said, I want to be in the physical realm. I want to express my divinity. And of course, there are thousands of ways to do that. There are many, I'll call it different stations in life, but that's why we embody. That's why we're here today. So, but how often in these conversations where there's the hand wringing going on, do we say, and people are saying, is there any way out? And is there, will our kids inherit a nice planet? How often does the conversation turn to conscious living and say, wait a minute, why are we even, why did we embody and why are we here? We're all having a conversation about the challenges in the world, but why aren't we talking about why we embodied and what we can express and make of our lives where we're the light and the darkness and chaos and dysfunction around us, right? So this is an incredibly relevant conversation that we're having, because if you believe that Neale had a real conversations with God, and if you believe this wisdom that came through 137 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, where everybody was reading it and saying, my God, now where did this wisdom come from? Where you've got the 10 commitments and the 3 keys to conscious living and the 3 steps to holistic living and all of these things that come out of the Conversations with God book. Where did this wisdom come from? And is there any chance that there's a vision and wisdom that actually is deeply important to us now with all of what's happening in the world, speaking to action steps that we could take to create incredible, delicious homes and communities and a world that's really functional, healthy, with health and well-being. So that's what our whole Changing Humanity's Future initiative, which sounds pretty big, and it is big, where we're saying in 18 years, in 2040, we elevate conscious living as the thing. And we're all of us. So each of you feeling into this, because this is not a me and Neale thing at all.
I'd like to explain why we would want to do that, because I've indicated here that we've come to the realm of the physical in order to experience who we really are, but we want to do more than experience it. And here's where we come to a realization of what's really going on and why. We don't want to just, my understanding is, we don't want to just experience who we are. We want to expand our experience of who we really are. That is, all of life everywhere in the cosmos is engaged in the same singular process. I'm going to give it a word: evolution. Life is simply evolving, and through its physicalization, expressing itself in the next grandest version of the greatest vision it ever held about who it is. Not just human beings, but sentient beings everywhere in the cosmos. So our deepest desire is not only to know who we are, not only to express and experience who we are, but to expand who we are through a process called evolution. That's why what's occurring right now is occurring on this planet. Because as it has occurred in all developing and evolving civilizations throughout the cosmos, we're using the events of life, which we are creating, by the way. These aren't events being foisted upon us from some source outside of us. We're creating the climate crisis. We're creating the wars we've had around the world. Most people don't know, Steve, that we've had armed conflict on this planet for 92% of recorded history. Most people don't understand that right now, this minute, as we're listening to each other and having this conversation, this very minute, 653 children are dying every hour on this planet of, believe it or not, starvation. That is, we have so limited our own expansion, our own evolution, our own consciousness as a species, that we can't even stop 650 children from dying of starvation every hour. By the way, I'm not making these numbers up. Look it up on the internet. You'll find out that this is true. And we haven't even found a way to stop that. But we are now at least getting to the first level of how to stop it, which is to become consciously aware. Excuse me. To become consciously aware that it's happening. That's why consciousness is so important. Because we've now developed the tools, like the tool we're using right here, the internet. 25 years ago, heck, 15 years ago, what we're experiencing right now is Zoom, talking to each other and being able to tune into this program from anywhere in the world. 15 or 20 years ago, that would have seemed like an unspeakable miracle. So now we have the tools that make it possible for us to be consciously aware of the conditions that we have unconsciously created in order to produce the outcomes and circumstances that lead to our own evolution. So all of life is in the process of evolving. And we are evolving by solving the problems that we ourselves have created in the main. I'm not suggesting there are not problems that have been created by people, by conditions other than humans, windstorms, meteors, and so forth hitting the earth, whatever. Of course there are, but probably 85 to 90% of the complications and the problems facing humanity today are created by human beings. So now that we're becoming more and more aware of that, what's interesting, Steve, and what's sad, interesting in kind of a sad way, there are still hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, frankly, who don't even believe there's a climate crisis. They don't even believe that we have a problem here. Much less would they believe that we are the cause of it. So our opportunity is to wake ourselves and everyone else up to the whole process and why it's occurring and how it's occurring and how we can engage in that process to change the course of humanity's future. That's what the work of Humanity's Team is all about.
Yes, it is. So let's just bring it back to some things here that we're talking about. So there's the disco ball, you remember from back decades ago, where you had these hundreds of little faces on this light bulb that was in the middle of like a dance floor. Where we see that the bulb is the one that we can call the divine, God, again, universe, love, life, creator, whatever term we want. And those faces are each of us here. So let's actually leave now the disco bulb thing to, I saw in the paper today, they say there are 8 billion humans now on the earth.
In the past 12 years, we've added 1 billion people. Did you hear that, folks? In the past 12 years alone, we've added 1 billion people to our planet's population.
So, and we're here, as we're each of us a unique, beautiful, whole, divine expression, each of us. And where we just go to our station in life, so Neale's station in life with what he does as a speaker and with his retreats and writing books and things, and humanities team doing programs like this and humanities team, and then me and humanities team. We were guided to create this, all of these programs, the Global Oneness Summit, the Humanities Stream, plus this conscious streaming platform, all of these things that we do. And then each of you, you're guided to your own station in life. If you go to changinghumanitiesfuture.org, changinghumanitiesfuture.org, you'll see the whole discussion of this initiative that we launched in the spring. And right at the top, it has action steps. So you can click on action steps. And these also were cultivated, or you could call it excavated, right from the Conversations with God material. I didn't make it up. Neale didn't make it up. These are the action steps where, especially in the last book, the 9th book, called Conversations with God, Book 4, Awaken the Species, where there's all of this dialogue around the challenges that are here on the planet, and a little perspective on where we are, how far we've come, this journey that's in front of us, this conscious living journey that's in front of us, and action steps that we can take right now to get there. So one of those action steps is, it says to be guided by that still small voice within you, to allow yourself to be guided by that still small voice within you. So in the context of what Neale and I are talking about, of course, that has many possibilities daily, where we're meditating and praying in terms of getting in touch with specific things, but also general things of from your own station in life, what you're being guided to as one of the faces, the 8 billion faces, human faces of the divine on the planet. Because we believe, where we all follow these action steps, where we allow ourselves to be guided by that still small voice within us, and invite our friends to be guided to, and to then just share honestly of, hey, these are the things that I'm guided to and that are working pretty well. And I'm still working on these other things, that I don't quite have mastery of, but I'm focusing on, where we just have honest conversations with each other, that we then climb those stairs to, that beautiful song of years ago, The Stairway to Heaven, where we're taking these conscious steps into these evolution steps, as Neale's describing it, into the fullness of what we're being invited to, because we're going with him.
Glad you brought this up, Steve, because it's important for people to understand that I'm not the source. I don't want anyone to think, oh, Neale wrote a book called Conversations with God, so we now have to pay attention to everything he's written and all the guidance he's been given. The first message I received in my Conversations with God, the very first message was, all of us are having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else. I had the temerity, fair enough. I had the nerve, if you will, to call it Conversations with God, because that's what it was in my experience. But Steve is now talking about the inner guidance, that still small voice within. It's the same thing. All of us are having conversations with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else because maybe our own particular culture has not made it easy for us to call it a conversation with God. So we call it, a sudden insight, or an epiphany, or women's intuition, or a psychic hit, or inner guidance of the voice within. You can call it what you want. We're all having the same experience. And by the way, if you think that you're coming to this program right now is a coincidence, think again. You were guided somehow or another. You became aware of this very program you're watching. And somehow or another, a voice within you said, turn it on and see what it has to say. And don't be surprised if you're reminded of what you already understood deeply within you is true. Because that, my friends, is exactly what's happening in this moment.
No question about it. We're in the moment of the big shift, the big pivot into conscious livings, where when we leave the planet, where we know that our kids and our kids' kids are going to inhabit a beautiful, sustainable, flourishing world. And admittedly, that's a big leap from where we are today, which is why we're so passionate, Neale and I, coming on to have this conversation with you, where this is the invitation for all of us, where we're all standing on a level playing field, nobody has a bigger volume switch or connection to the divine than the next person. Is
Nicely put. Nicely put.
Yeah, thank you. So we're all standing here, and boy, it's a decision each of you make, that all of us make together. That's what counts. Which is why we're so passionate, because Neale and I together, and with the humanities team and the Conversations with God Foundation, there's no way that the massive change we're talking about, that's all of us saying, hey, this wisdom makes sense. By the way, even if you've never heard of the Conversations with God books, and you've never read the books, and you don't plan to ever read the books, what I would say is just look at the wisdom, this notion that we're all expressions of the divine. This is why we came into this life. We'll cover some other wisdom here during the hour, but look at the wisdom and then just ask yourself, is there another way to live on this planet to create a sustainable and flourishing planet that makes more sense? Is there another, do you have another roadmap, other wisdom that you think makes more sense than that? And of course, if you do, then by all means, my God, follow that. But I don't run into people that say they have this wisdom, this roadmap, this invitation. What I run into are people that say, yeah, I think it that feels like it was God's wisdom to me. And if it was, for God's sakes, why are we not moving heaven on earth, to manifest this change in our life, in our homes, in our communities, and out in the world? That's what Changing Humanity's Future is about, this initiative. That's what it's about. So let me bring in, there's a question here from one of you in this room. It says, this is from Hilda. She says, after reaching to a higher consciousness, do we choose to come back to evolve again? And Neale, you kind of talk through that. Maybe we go right down into this question to make sure we create clarity here for Hilda.
My understanding is no. My understanding is evolution is only a one direction movement, and it's upward, always upward. My dear friend Barbara Marx Hubbard answered this question as well in her moments of clarity and inspiration. And she made the statement that evolution only moves upward. We don't come back in another lifetime, or even in this lifetime, at a lower level of evolution to start all over again. That we get the opportunity from life to proceed upward, ever upward, and that evolution expands, and continues to expand. Our awareness of self, our understanding of self, our experience of ourself never ends in terms of its expansion. But from my awareness, I could be wrong. I don't want to pretend that I have every single answer to every single question, but I did ask the same question, my friend, and the answer I got was definitive. No, we are expanding in only one direction. And that's the call of life. The call of life is to the next step, and the next step, and the next step, and the next grandest expression of who we really are.
So thank you, Neale. Let me just bring in a little more wisdom for if you all that have read the 9 Conversations with God books. Here's one. This is I think this is in book 1. It describes living consciously and the core concepts of holistic living. So it says, to live consciously, we do 3 things. We live deliberately, harmoniously, and beneficially. Deliberately, harmoniously, and beneficially. And then it says the core concepts to holistic living are with awareness, honesty, and responsibility. So again, I'm putting this out there because this is not a Conversations with God book club movement. That is not what Changing Humanity's Future is. Honestly, I don't care whether you've read the Conversations with God books. I personally, changed my whole life, but I don't really care. What I care about is the wisdom, I'm calling it, that we excavate, where we talk about what is conscious living? What are the core concepts to holistic living? What is the greater wisdom in this series? And then we put that in the middle of the table, and we look at that and we say, now, in this day where there's all this hand-wringing, can this lead us out to this sustainable and flourishing planet? And if so, how do we organize each of us where we take those steps and move in that direction, and extend the invitation to the whole of the planet. So, because that's what Humanity's Team and Neale and the Conversations with God Foundation are doing with our initiative that we're calling Changing Humanity's Future. We believe there's only one thing, truthfully, this is not any marketing spin, there's only one thing that creates that path to a sustainable and flourishing future, and that's to raise consciousness. This is what Neale was, as he was taking you down into that here earlier, this wisdom that comes straight from the books. Raising consciousness is the thing. It's the, and of course, Einstein himself said, at this current level of consciousness, isn't going to happen. It's got to be at a whole new level of consciousness that we create this worldview, this awareness, these action steps that allow us to live fruitfully with the health and well-being that we're after on the planet.
Einstein famously said, we cannot solve any problem using the same energy that created it. So you're not going to bring an end to anger with anger. You're not going to bring an end to violence with violence. You're not going to bring an end to carelessness with carelessness. You're not going to solve any problem using the same energy that created it. And the death penalty is the perfect example. We think that if we just extend the death penalty to every nation on earth for every kind of huge offense we can imagine deserves a death penalty, that we're going to end those behaviors. But guess what? In states and nations where they have the death penalty, it hasn't solved anything. The conditions that we use the death penalty to bring an end to have continued. Hello, hello. Earth to Neale, hello. So the messages are very clear. Einstein being only one of the really clear thinkers on the planet who have made that abundantly clear for the rest of us.
Yes, he did. Boy, and he was followed Nassim Haramein. He's coming out here soon with a unified field theory, his Resonance Science Foundation. If some of you all are stream members that we can see on screen here. So hopefully you've gone through Forbidden Science. If not, boy, go through Forbidden Science with Greg Braden and Nassim Haramein, where he gets into the science of the entire cosmos, from the quantum field, atom, proton level, to cosmological objects, whole galaxies, and equations that actually share that we're, in Nassim's words, sovereign to one body, which he calls the universe, which, again, universe works fine. He's saying where we walk around in the knowing that where everybody on the screen really deeply understands that you are part of the living universe, this breathing universe, that you're a part of it, and there's no universe without you. My God, look at how straight you walk. Look at the posture that you walk in that. It's the same thing as Neale, where he's sharing, we're all one, with God and each other and all of life, where you can stand up really tall because there's no universe, there's no God without you. I mean, it's incredible. Talk about empowerment. My God. Okay, here's another question, Neale. So this is from Megan, and she says, Homo sapiens seem to always take things to the extreme. They go from one extreme to another. How can we stay in the middle so that we do not hurt people?
By simply understanding the foundational ethic that has been placed before every sentient being in the cosmos as a way to behave with each other. We're going to have to do something very daring, my friends. This is very daring, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but if you're offended by what I'm about to say, I apologize ahead of time. But what we're going to have to change in direct answer to your question, my friend, is what our understanding of truly moral behavior, spiritual behavior, and loving behavior is. And that behavior is not the behavior that we have ascribed to the God of our understanding. Most of the world's religions, and by the way, there are more than 4,000 of them, another number, I'm not making these numbers up. You can check out the statistics. Most of the world's 4,000 religions tell us that God loves us, no question about it, but that God also is judgmental, condemning, and punishing. That is, God has things that God needs to have experienced to be accomplished. And I can give you a long list of them, whether it's the clothes you wear, how much of your body is covered, depending on your gender, the food that you eat, the words that you speak, whatever you say. And if you violate any of those regulations, that God will judge you, condemn you, and punish you. Now, you might say, Neale, what's the problem with that? That makes total sense. Does it really? Is that what we imagine the highest power in the universe to be? An essence, an element that needs stuff to occur in order to keep it happy enough to not judge us, punish us, and condemn us? But if we decide, yes, this is how God really is, then of course we will model that behavior, because what those religions also teach us is to behave the way God behaves, seek to act divinely. And if what we think that God is doing when these things occur is acting divinely, then we will also love each other, but judge each other, condemn each other, and punish each other, even as we imagine God does with us, which is what gives us the moral justification to kill people in order to teach people to stop killing people. And we can't even see the contradiction. We think it makes perfect moral sense. And it doesn't make moral sense. It makes nonsense, which is why we've had armed conflict on this planet for 92% of recorded history. Somewhere we have misplaced a piece of data. Somewhere, someday we have to ask ourselves a simple question, my friends. I dare you ask yourself a simple question. I could, by the way, be wrong about everything I've just said. Everything I've said the past hour, I could be wrong about all of that. But we have to ask ourselves, at least have the bravery to ask ourselves this question. Is it possible, just possible, that there is something that I don't fully understand here about God, about life, about myself even, the understanding of which would change everything?
And here's the thing, is at this moment where this pivot, this shift is crucial, because I think all of us would agree, we can't wait a decade for a shift, right? I mean, we look at what is out in the world today, and waiting 10 years, there's no way. We need to begin that shift now. Now, right at this time where it's critical, and by the way, we have begun this ninth book in the Conversations with God series. If you've read it, book 4, Awaken the Species, it says that the hardest part of this journey to conscious living is behind you. It's behind you. And that was kind of startling when I read it, but to stop and sit with that and think about these last 30 years with back Conversations with God, book 1, 1995, A Course in Miracles before that, and look at how the world has changed in these dramatic ways, where in the 90s, when we talk about these kinds of things, people would look at you cross-eyed, versus today, where we talk about connection and interdependence, even oneness. Look how far we've come. These things that are now the narrative for the conscious journey, they're out in the world. The problem, the reason we created this initiative, is we haven't all kind of come together as a global undertaking, where we say, let's move together, let's journey together, hand in hand, heart and heart, to this destination 18 years from now, where the whole of the earth is conscious. That hasn't happened, the global undertaking. That's the reason we created this initiative. Let me bring in one other thing that is just, it's the way, it's perfect in, I'm going to call it, in God's world, where now, when we need to trust this message that Neale's bringing through, that spans all 9 books, that there's not a dual world. There is no such thing as the devil. There is no duality. There is evil, of course, life spelled backwards, where we make these decisions that are not affirming life, but there's no devil. Now, go inside of Greg Braden's science. Go inside of Nassim Harameyn's science, Lynn McTaggart's research. Go inside of Dean Radin, Ion's science. And it talks about a universe of perfect harmony. The program we're doing right now with Greg Braden, the free program, if you've seen it, it's called Moving from Surviving to Thriving. I hope you all have looked at the program. It's amazing. And Greg just brings it right in. There's the universe is in perfect harmony. Where we love ourselves enough to really come into the fullness of who we really are and live that out, which is what Neale and I are talking about. Greg talks about in his program. We come into perfect harmony with the universe around us. We create this, you could call it heaven on earth or health and well-being. So there's science that's affirming this whole non-dual nature to the universe. Okay, Neale, and boy, this hour is going fast. Here we are. We've only got about 9 more minutes, maybe, unless we go a few minutes over. But so Neale, here's a question from David. Can you make suggestions on how parents can consciously explain our changing planet that doesn't terrify them? And David says, my twin daughters are 8 years old.
There's a book called Conversations with God for Parents or for Children. And it directs itself to that particular quandary. How do I explain this? And so there are some resources out there. But the way I would explain it initially is to say that our God, the essence of this wonderful entity that we call God, can be defined in 2 words, in pure love, that God is pure love. And so all we have to do, and there's nothing frightening about pure love. Pure love is simply that. It's a love that requires, needs, demands, and commands nothing in return. And then we can, the most powerful way, of course, for us to open the minds of children to the world in which we live and the possibilities that we lay before us that we can create is to, sorry to be so predictable, but to demonstrate those possibilities through the living of, and the expression of your own life. Or to put it another way, when your children experience your love as unending, unlimited, and unconditional, requiring nothing in return, in that way, they will begin to experience a universe, a life, a planet, and a future that is safe. And then they will know how to create it because they'll have something to imitate. Most of life is imitation, by the way. Most of the things that we've done as a species, all sentient beings imitate themselves in increasingly ways, at increasing levels of awareness and at higher and higher levels of consciousness. So, modeling behavior is the answer to your question. And then your children will understand how they can experience the kind of world that would not be filled with fear, but filled with pure love. It's sad, Steve, we can't even love each other, adults, right now. We haven't quite gotten to the point yet where we can love each other purely without needing, requiring, demanding, or expecting anything in return. That's why I mentioned earlier in a moment of transparency that I've had failed marriages before the marriage that I'm now in. I've been now blessed with a 15-year marriage, which doesn't seem long to some people, but for me, it's a record. 15 years with the same person, because I finally learned, I see. When I can love my beloved, my wife, not because I need something or hope to get something or require anything in return, but my loving of her is simply an expression of who I am, not who I hope she will be with regard to me. Wow. You know what's amazing? We can love dogs that way, kittens that way. We can love horses that way. But the person on the pillow next to us, many of us find it difficult to love that person on the pillow next to us in that way. Where we can say, you know what? I don't require anything of you for me to love you. I simply love you because of who you are. Now, if children experience us loving in that way, that doesn't mean a life without consequences. It doesn't mean a life without results, but it means a life where love is never questioned, where we never even have to think for 1 second that we've lost the love of our parents. When we can model that behavior with our children, we have found the answer to the question that you asked. And some ways to do that will be found in the book, Conversations with God for Parents.
Yeah, boy, and I'll just say, for me personally, where you really sponge up this wisdom of the 9 series of books, where the love of the divine for each person here, for all of life in the galaxy and the cosmos and the universe, is just extreme. Because we're an emanation of the one. Of course there's that kind of love for us. We're an emanation of the one. A living, energetic presence of the one. And of course, we're going to be loved on that level. It's said right in the books, God is loving itself. You're a part of his self. And then where we feel that, where that takes me, is where you then think about God, my love for God, and then my love for each person and the planet. Because we're one. I'm looking at myself. That's where it takes me. And candidly, that's where the miracles happen for me, where we're in that place of being loved and then expressing love, where in a sense we say, my will is your will. And then the divine says, my will is, because the divine starts it with my will is your will. That comes through in Conversations with God, where we then return that and say, and now my will is your will. And that's perfect love back and forth. Wow. Watch what God will do through you.
That's the purpose. Yes, that's the purpose of marriage. When we marry each other with pure love at the heart of our marriage, we are saying to the other, I marry you not because of what I can get from you. I marry you because of what I can give to you. And my highest bliss is the giving of it, not the receiving of it from you. That doesn't mean I don't want to receive it from you. It simply means my highest bliss is the giving of my love to you. And when you say the same thing to me, oh my gosh, now we have a true marriage, a true oneness. I could, of course, be wrong about all of that.
But I don't think so. Yeah. So let me just say, we're now in the final couple minutes here. And this has been terrific. This is actually the first time in all these broadcasts that we've actually been broadcasting right inside of the green room where we can see everybody. So hooray. Big bow to all of you. This has been fun. I hope for you all also. So one thing I want to just share, this is a personal note. I don't know that, I don't think Neale would even say this, but I'll say it. This wisdom from the 9-book series where you read, so to me, where I'm going to call it Neale convened the big public conversations with God, as we're both mentioning and Neale is emphasizing, my God, every single one of us here, even today, is having conversations with God. We're having conversations with God all the time. So, but there was one big public conversation where these questions of who are we? Why are we here? What's our invitation in life? Where all of these things are entertained, where that wisdom all comes through, where the vision of where we are on the journey, that we're already past the hardest part of the hill, where these action steps to the full-on sustainable and flourishing planet that's described, especially in the last book, book 4, Awaken the Species. So what I did with that, and I did this literally in the mid-90s, Actually, this was inside of the 9-book series, because the 9th book wasn't even out yet. But I read this material and I said, now that dream is my dream. And then I quit. I left Silicon Valley. I sold all of the things I was doing. And here I am 20 years later. And I'll tell you, I'm as passionate today as I was then, probably more. Where every morning I get up. That dream, that's my dream. And so if you come to our, Neale and I are doing a meeting here on November 30th. That's a Wednesday. It's at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You might want to write that down. Hopefully you get our humanities team communications. We're going to have a 90-minute meeting where we update on changing humanity's future. And we'll go into a lot more in that meeting. Wednesday, November 30th, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And you're going to hear a lot more about changing humanity's future. But that's what we're doing. That's what humanities team is doing. Is we're saying we don't care if you've read the Conversations with God books. Let's just look at the wisdom. Let's look at the vision. Let's look at the action steps. And if you think that this makes sense, and of course, this is, our lives are precious things. So we've got to consider this deeply, sleep on it. But where you sleep on it and come to the same conclusion that dream is my dream, then work with us, hand in hand, heart connected to heart, to make this a reality on the planet. Let's change humanity's future. Okay, and I want to thank Neale Donald Walsch for being here. I want to thank you all. So we can see, of course, there are people all out, the Sign Network, John Raymer. So we're broadcasting out across many Facebook sites, and to the Conversations with God sites, the humanities team sites. So thank you all for being here with us. And next week, I'm with Greg Braden at the normal time. So that's 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern. That's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Next week, join Greg and I. We're going to get into a great conversation. And Neale's coming off of being sick. Boy, you'd never know it. So Neale, thanks for being here today with us.
Thank you. It's been lovely to be here with you. And I hope that you will all take to heart what your soul brought you here today to remember.
Amen. Amen. Soul power. The civil rights movement for the soul. Humanities team. That's another term we use for humanities team. Thanks for being here, everybody. Be back with you Wednesday next week. Have a fabulous rest of week and weekend, and look forward to being with you a week from now. Love and peace and blessings.